Welcome to Breakout Room 2, called Towards a European Identity. Good to see you here. As we have heard, we're going to have two presentations, one from Professor Wintel. He's going to start, and then Nicolas DeSantis directly follows with his presentation. After the presentation, we will have our open discussion, and during the discussion, you can just unmute yourself to speak up. You can raise your hand with the Zoom reaction function, or you can write into the chat. It's a free floor. You can just ask questions to the speakers, but you can also tell us about your perspective, vision, and ideas regarding the topic. Just be polite, please, and wait until the last person has spoken. I pass over my word to Professor Wintel. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be invited to your discussions, and I'm very grateful. I'm going to read my contribution because I'm rather unfamiliar with the Zoom genre. You'll forgive me. My name is Michael Wintel. I'm a historian of Europe, mainly Western Europe, I'm afraid. I've taught mainly in the United Kingdom and for a long time at Amsterdam University, where until about 2 years ago, I was head of European studies, research and teaching for the best part of 17 years. I'm now retired, though I keep my hand in with supervising PhDs and a lot of reading. My last book was on Eurocentrism, which I suppose is quite critical of Europe. I'm lucky enough to have triple citizenship, Dutch, British and Canadian. So that's me. Towards a European identity, I've been asked to introduce the subject for about 10 minutes. It is indeed a subject I've thought about as a historian quite a lot. It's a very big subject. It keeps growing on you. So I'll select just a few aspects which I hope you'll find interesting and relevant. First, what is identity and what is European identity in particular, and what does it consist of? Then, is it important? Is it desirable? Is it a good thing? My answers to those later questions, I should warn you perhaps, will not necessarily all be positive. European identity has some negative sides. So first, identity. Identities are an impression, an image that we have of ourselves, and they are often comparative. Identity can provide people with a positive self-image, potentially giving support, continuity, and feelings of belonging. But identities can also be negative in their effects, mainly in that they can emphasize difference from other groups, sometimes to an alarming degree, and can underpin political exclusion. Identities, and especially collective identities, have multiple components. They are constantly in flux rather than fixed forever. They're largely constructed rather than genetic or primordial, and are at least partly based on the perception of what we are not, rather than what we are. We call this othering. But some would say that there is little evidence that such a European identity actually exists, beyond the kind of propaganda campaign by European elites, mainly in Brussels, which has little meaning for ordinary Europeans. Some maintain it's been an artificial political stratagem to promote the EU. Nicolas DeSantis may have something to say about that. Chris Shaw, for example, who's now in New Zealand, an academic, exposed how the Commission had launched a public relations committee and campaign in the 1980s to boost European identity in a difficult economic period with all sorts of gimmicks taken from national identity campaigns, flags, anthems, town twinning, and that sort of thing. Some maintain that there can be no true European identity because Europe lacks the essential ingredients of national identity, like a common language, a common history, common sufferings, and common myths. I think that's a bit harsh. European identity does exist, but it's not quite the same as a national identity. Historically, the two are separated by a century or more, say between the 1870s and the 1970s, and they were set up in completely different circumstances. It's clear from countless questionnaires and surveys that large numbers of Europeans, often around half, have some feelings of identification with Europe and or the European Union, and have done for decades. Even the narrow Brexit vote of 2016 would seem to point in that direction. Nearly half the country voted to stay in the Union. European identity does not demand the kind of devotion that the nation does. Europe does not insist on such things as military service, for example, unswerving loyalty to the state, in this case the EU, to a political leader, or, come to that, to a football team. European identity is broader, vaguer, and more cultural, and seems to be a kind of allegiance to an idea of Europe, not usually in competition with other components of the identity matrix, such as family, religion, or indeed the nation. Now, a dominant theme in much of the literature on European identity is to make a distinction between a civic identity and a cultural identity. Jürgen Habermas once defined the civic identity of nation states, and potentially of Europe, as being based on a political system into which citizens opt, thereby obtaining various rights and duties, such as the vote and other political rights, citizenship, taxation, military service, civil society, welfare benefits, and the like. Civic and political values, rather than shared origins and character traits, would be the basis of the collective identity. As yet, I'm afraid, there is not very much support for this civic identity at an EU level. The other side of European identity is a cultural identity, which is quite different from that legally bound political version. It has little to do with rights or opting in. It rests on the basis of an assumed European culture of which you are or are not a part. It's not really a question of choice. This assumes that Europeans share something in common, whether it be a result of environment, race, genes, a primordial culture, or other factors, which endows Europeans with shared characteristics that others do not possess, or not in the same configuration or degree. Those perceived European characteristics or values include such quantities as rationality, Christianity, dynamism, dedication to hard work, freedom-loving, and so on. It's all down to culture. And it is here that I must sound a warning note about European identity, apart from the civic or the legal version. Why? Well, it's virtually impossible to prove that there is such a thing as a single European culture. The geographical borders of Europe are not fixed, especially in the East. In environmental terms, Europe is very varied indeed. Any search for racial unity is a doomed cause, not least because of centuries and millennia of migration. Within the Indo-European language family, there is also enormous variety. A European identity based on a single European culture has stubbornly refused to materialize. And the idea that a collective identity can be based on a single common culture is in itself problematic. There are many Europes. Each country, and indeed each group within each country, has its own view of Europe. Europe as a concept or alleged culture is regularly used in a wide range of ways as various movements weaponize it and try to use it to promote their own particular national, regional, or political identity formation. Europe is an idea under continuous negotiation, always contested and often contradictory. Europe and European culture are discourses with many voices, including some from outside the conventional geographical borders and those of newcomers from ex-colonies and elsewhere. It's an important discourse, even a discourse of power, but one with many different meanings. For some, an ancient Greek heritage or the Enlightenment might be important, and for others not. Again, there are many Europes. The danger of assuming that European culture and identity are more united and homogeneous than they are is that they become exclusive or essentialist. The single culture does not really exist. The issue is politically important because it affects the political legitimacy of the EU project. Do people feel European enough to make a major contribution to the EU, for example, in common foreign and security policy or in fiscal matters, or do they just want a common trade area? National identity has, for at least 150 years, been the primary legitimating force behind nation states and governments. And it could, of course, I wonder whether European identity can ever provide an underpinning and similar legitimacy for the EU. And although as a historian I'm not really qualified to pronounce on the matter, what of the question of European identity and access to EU membership? In the course of the accession debates in the 1990s, the EU tended to assume that the states seeking accession had some way to go before they met the required standards, however they might be defined. Many of us, I think, felt the awkwardness of states being obliged to submit to such a hegemonic process of being found wanting in compliance with somebody else's values. Turkey was perhaps the most humiliated applicant. In the rather startling words of Bo Straat, the enlargement discourse in Brussels was nothing other than a reworking of the white man's burden discourse. In terms of identity, respect for diversity is invariably cited as a core item in European culture and indeed in European identity. It is odd then that so many assertions of European identity are exclusionary. We so often hear arguments about migrating hordes of people who do not share our values, in other words, othering. Europe is indeed a discourse which, in theory, might bring people together, for like nationalism, it appeals to various groups for various reasons. Europe is therefore in the eye of the beholder, and it's not necessary for EU structures to be based upon a single common united culture or identity. To expect everyone to think that their identity is exactly the same as that of all other Europeans is beyond the bounds of possibility, necessity, and indeed of desirability. We should be sparing with our declarations of what European identity is, and on the occasions that pronouncements must indeed be made, we should ensure that they are inclusive rather than exclusive. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Nicholas, I directly hand over to you. And you're still muted.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Michael, for your speech. I'm going to show my screen if you don't mind.
You should be able to. Yeah, you're able to share it.
I think I'm sharing the screen, so I'm gonna go to full screen. Okay, well, thank you. I'm Nicolas DeSantis. I'm the founder of the Brand EU Center. It's the only existing independent center that focuses only on the brand EU and European identity. It was founded a few years ago, and I'll give you a few details about what we do. We were created basically, I've been working on European identity projects for almost 25 years now. And the idea is that the project of Europe is in a constant identity crisis. As Europe, and we're going to see that in a second, but as Europe has been growing, both deepening and widening, and we could see how, in a way, when you look at the Maidan in Ukraine, what you could see is that people looked at this project as a positive project to join that would give them very concrete things. It could give them a currency, it could give them a single market, it could give them more freedoms, it could give them more protection from judiciary. So what we've managed to create is a very powerful concept. And in fact, I believe that newer countries give more value to Europe than countries that have been there for longer within the European Union. Because within the European Union, we've been taking Europe for granted because it's been growing over many decades. And we kind of see it as an institution that is distant, and we take for granted our liberties. And as you could see what happened in Ukraine, you can't take those things for granted. My co-founder of the center was the former president of the European Parliament, a very important figure in European construction, Enrique Barón Crespo. So when I offered to him the project, he loved it because he said one of the problems of European construction is the identity and branding of it. So myself, I worked in several projects about European identity. The first one was rebranding the European movement, which is not a European Union institution, but it's let's call them a think tank and European independent movement of bringing a federal movement. It's made out of federalist ideals of a federal Europe. So very, very, let's call them entrenched Europeans that have been building Europe towards a federation. I work with the European Parliament in projects of identity and rebranding. And I've also been participant in the launch of the euro in terms of presenting the euro as a new currency. So the conclusion of working for many years is that the identity of a united Europe is distant and weak. And we told the European Parliament back in the 90s that as you enlarge Europe and it deepens, if you don't explain to people why you're doing it, what was the vision, you're going to get at some point backlash. And we saw that with Brexit more recently. So the center's mission is to assist in the creation of an exciting is an important concept here, EU brand, identity and vision that connects with citizens and the rest of the world. That was the mission that we set up to create. Part of the issue was also that in 2016, in the State of the Union address, the Commissioner Juncker really said, yes, we do have an existential crisis of identity in Europe. And Europeans don't know why we exist. They take for granted a lot of things, but they do not love Europe in terms of emotions. But it's not my job as commissioner, or it's not the job of the commission to do it. So when I saw that, I said, if it's not your job, and if it's not the national government's job, whose jobs is it to create a European identity? So that brings you to understand that the identity problem is in no man's land. Nobody seems to want to take care of it. They didn't want to take care of it, and they have all the money in the world to be able to help with that problem. So our journey with Europe started in the 1990s. Back then it was called European Community until 93. We were in the middle of the fall of the Soviet Union. We had the Balkan Wars. We had many things going on, like the Maastricht Treaty. We had economic and monetary union. We were preparing to launch this thing called the euro, which was called the ECU up to earlier on. Then there was a big focus on enlarging Europe with Sweden, Finland, and Austria joining. And then we were opening our borders to accept 8 Eastern European nations. I mean, this is unbelievable. When you look at all the list of things I'm showing you, the Maastricht Treaty is like a constitution for Europe, but it's not, because the constitution project was killed. But we're talking about enormous change in Europe affecting Europeans and the identity of Europe. So the other thing we realize is that EU symbolism is too distant and institutional. The European flag doesn't make you feel, oh my God, I feel like America when I look at it. The euro is in your pocket. And for many Europeans, except the British, although when the British go to, or used to go, well, they go to Europe, they have to buy euro and use it. And for them, it's very convenient if they go to Italy, Spain, or France to only have one currency. Everybody loved the euro, but they wanted to keep the pound. The European Anthem, which is the Beethoven's 9th Symphony, it's very beautiful, but it's very like, doesn't create the emotions that are required. Nobody I can talk to about Europe knows exactly what the date of Europe Day is. The European passport really does not exist, although in many of our passports says European Community or European Union, but the color is still that horrible brown color. And then we started to have things like the European driving license, but we can see that all these things represent mostly the bureaucracy of Brussels remaining a distant and uncool concept. So that we have definitely basis for identity, but they're not like when we see the American flag, or used to at least believe that there was opportunity there. The other big problem is it's impossible to understand how the European Union works. It's too complex to understand what's federal, what's national. You cannot call it a federation because it's not, it's a hybrid. You don't know what the council does versus the commission. So to try and explain this to a citizen, for a citizen to be able to say, I understand how European governance works, because not even experts understand it. So it's a very complex brand from an institutional point of view to understand. And Brexit, what Brexit has shown is that when it came to voting, and you know, it was a very close result, but the conclusion has been that they left. And that was a big identity loss for both the UK and the EU to lose such a powerful nation within the European Union. It's a huge loss. The repercussions, they're still unknown, because the effects of Brexit, we're still not feeling them in full. We've had a lot of problems in terms of inward investment during the transition towards leaving the EU. But we still don't know the conclusion of Brexit in the UK. It's going to take a while to understand the repercussions. What we have seen, though, is that if a country wants to leave, it is possible if you put it to a referendum, which makes the brand of Europe quite weak, because if anybody can try to come in or leave whenever they want, institutionally, that creates a lot of uncertainty. And that has created huge uncertainty in the UK. Because also the people that wanted to leave the European Union sold an unreal world that Brexit was going to bring riches. And the reason why they could do that is because the European identity was unclear. And we're going to see why it's unclear. And the EU did nothing to defend itself here in the in the UK. And then, of course, the Commission said we should have done something to defend ourselves when they saw that they lost. And I went to see the Commission and Parliament to tell them, we're going to lose this referendum and you got to do something. And they did nothing, although we recommended that. So what you can see here is that you have citizens on the left, which you could be a Ukrainian or an Italian and say, okay, I define myself European. I have a feeling, a small feeling or a big feeling of being European. But when I start to understand what that really means, there's a huge ocean of misinformation, which is something that was created also in the Brexit referendum in UK. And there's a huge knowledge gap about the EU to make that bridge jump. So to be able to be a true European and understand what the reality of Europe, and it's been very generational. I mean, the generation that saw the Euro launch has maybe a better understanding than the younger generations now that are seeing the Brexit, that are seeing a lot of security issues going on. But we haven't managed to bridge the emotional and attachment gap because we have this huge ocean of misinformation, which is also caused because the EU produces huge amounts of information and data that it's impossible to cope with. So when we started to obviously our work, the media, we got a lot of media attention. The Brand EU Center has done a lot of talks about trying to communicate the gap, that we have a problem, a gap in communication and misinformation. We've done a lot of publications trying to explain what is a European identity. We did a special one to demystify all the lies that were being told by Brexiteers, the lies about millions of Turks being at the borders of the UK, swimming the channel to invade Britain. And then also what we did to help a comparison, we said, okay, if we had to compare the European Union government with the US government, how would they compare? To show them that Europe is not a federation like the US, but it has federal powers in many situations. So we've done also work at parliament level. We've done a few campaigns supporting passing bills in the House of Commons. And we co-signed a letter to Theresa May to defend the rights of EU citizens in the UK. Because once the UK leaves the European Union, the UK citizens will lose the European citizenship that gives them a lot of rights in Europe. So we see a lot of those issues. And again, we've done a lot of infographics to, as I mentioned, comparing the EU and the US on different policy agendas to show them what's federal and what's local. And we've done a lot of work, but as you can see, there's a huge amount of information that needs to get there. And we do a lot of lectures around the world. This is an example, even in Wyoming, one of the US states, we give lectures to citizens of America that want to learn about Europe and how it works. And we've done campaigns also to try and bring closer Europe to citizens in different ways, like comparing the UK with Japan, China, and the US, and showing how Europe together is more powerful than the superpowers, that we shouldn't be building imaginary walls, that the Berlin Wall fell 25 years ago, why we're going to bring it back, and telling them, yes, Europe might be complex, but you have to understand it because it's in your interest. We also launched a superhero called Captain Euro, because when we did the launch of the euro, we were supporting that launch with Captain Euro in the outside of the United Kingdom. But Captain Euro has been an amazing tool to test people in their European identity, in terms of seeing how they would perceive a European comic book and a European character that is representing Europe. We also launched a fashion line called 12 Stars, testing again European identity, and we're selling a lot of 12 Stars merchandise. You can go to 12stars.com to look at the merchandise range. This is aimed at youth. Here are some examples. 12 Stars, of course, is the flag of Europe that doesn't change. And that's kind of the presentation to show you what the brand EU Center is doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I think it's so interesting to see what you're doing. Yeah, I also see some clapping hands from Joachim. Also, I want to invite you all to open your screen so we can see your faces, just if you feel comfortable. But yeah, let's get started into the discussion. Are there any questions to the speakers or in general? Just unmute yourself or raise your hand. For now, I see no. Also from Nicholas or Michael Wintel, do you have any questions to each other, maybe even? Yes, Professor Wintel want to say something, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. And just to get things rolling, perhaps Nicholas could explain something a little bit more. The EU is very complicated. I'm not an EU specialist, but I am a Europe specialist, and I've looked at it a lot. And it is indeed complex, the way the Commission and the Parliament and the other bodies interact. But if you look at a country like Belgium, which I'm reasonably familiar with, that is incredibly complex. A lot of Belgians don't understand the political system there, and I suspect it's true also of other countries, not unlike Italy. I don't know Italy so well, but it seems very complex to me. Is it really that complex? Is it so hard to explain the balance of power and the mechanisms of power in Europe?
Yes, it is, because it's not one theory. I'm assuming the Belgian system is a federal system, but you cannot look. People need clarity on whether it's in America. They know it's a federal system. There's a constitution. Maybe they don't know Constitution Day, but they know the 4th of July. So they know the 4th of July is Independence Day. They celebrated this Labor Day. In Europe, nobody knows when the Europe's Day is or what it means. What I mean by complex is it's for experts, like any system of government. But there are some things in government. In the UK, you have a UK Parliament, and then you have the House of Lords. You have an understanding that there is two things. We don't have a constitution as such, but at least I know what the Parliament does and what the House of Lords is and who the actual Prime Minister is. In Europe, we don't know if the president of the commission is it the president of Europe, or is it the council president who's the president of Europe? Who do I call? So it's and then what are the powers? Who makes the laws? The parliament doesn't make the laws unless the commission initiates them. It's impossible to understand democratically. That's why the accusations are always of democratic deficit to the European Union. Especially that's what was used by the Brexiteers. Of course, for an expert, it's easy to understand. For a citizen, it's impossible. And of course, Michael, we assume also that citizens are really not that interested in government workings, if you know what I mean. But Europe is very complex and the issue is that the people that don't like Europe, they accuse Europe of the constant democratic deficit. That's why I defend Parliament a lot, the European Parliament, because we managed to get a parliament which represents millions of Europeans. It's an incredible achievement in governance. But hell, do I want to, is it easy for me to explain to someone? I can show you a chart that we made to explain it, but it's really it's very complex how you explain the workings to someone that wants to actually spend 25 minutes understanding the difference between the European Council, the Council of Europe, which is so there's a lot of names that are connected, but they're not even European institutions, like the Council of Europe. As you know, the Council of Europe is a non-European Union institution, but it's called like the European Council, which is the biggest, highest body in the EU, made of the nation states, which then tell the Commission seems to be dependent on both the Council and the Parliament to operate, and the Parliament requires the Commission to be involved to operate. It's impossible to understand.
Okay, you clearly think it's very complex. Though
Yes.
the British system, which is the one I know best, constantly surprises me what governments can do and can't do, and the way they get brought back by the judicial system. All these things are new to me every time they happen. So I think a lot of countries have very complex systems, even if they're not as extraordinary as Belgium. But if that's the case, how successful have you been in trying to explain it? Because that's obviously a part of your remit, self-imposed remit.
Well, for Michael, we don't try to explain to citizens the workings of the EU because they're not interested. They really want to know what's in it for me. No, because as you said, it's a matter for constitutional experts to really get interested in the workings of government. Don't forget that it's easier to explain a nation states, as you said, than a supranational organization's constitutional workings become exponentially more complex. But we try to kind of go down to explain. Let me show you an example, which might give you an idea how hard my job is. But it shows you. Let me see if I can find it. It shows you that our job for the citizen in the street is not to try to explain the complexities of Europe. We would bore them to death. It's to explain them why the EU is important in their daily lives. Can you see this slide?
Yes, can.
This is a simple, we made a set of cards trying to communicate what Europe is about. And we were telling people, don't lose your EU citizen superpower like Erasmus. Erasmus is the most successful student exchange program in history. Don't lose your superpowers like the euro. Realize that Europe is doing huge amount of work for climate change action. Do you know that you have something called the customs union, which is allowing you to make the single market function and allows you to trade goods without barriers across Europe. This is what we rather explain these things than the workings of the EU. And we even go into explaining judicial things about why the EU protects judicial independence at national level. And we've been doing that also with the examples of what's been happening in certain countries, including Poland and even the Ukraine. And Ukraine is not part of the EU, but the EU has been protecting judicial independence from a supranational perspective. What that means in practice is that judges in a European Union country know that, and this is about how a government and the judiciary are aligned, a national government, knowing that there's a third party overseeing that there has to be judicial independence at national level. Once you get out of the EU, you start losing that additional guarantee. But even that explanation has to be done in a comic book format to be able to talk to a citizen, as you can see.
It seems really, really hard work. We already have some questions in the chat. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a question from Andrea asking also Nicholas, what could be the backlashes of the Brexit in the future of the European identity?
The backlash. Well, I can tell you what I've learned because I've spent 3 years of my life fighting Brexit. When you realize, it's like looking at the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, a disaster. The reason why we actually even had a referendum was not because the people in the street were claiming, we want a referendum. No, it was because the Conservative Party was at a civil war with itself on the issue of Europe. Right? And then they were playing, unfortunately, in the hands of Nigel Farage of the UK Independence Party, who was taking a lot of voters away from the Conservative Party. So it's a purely national issue that led to the issue of the referendum that should have never been called. Once they called the referendum, I knew we were going to lose because the EU was not defending itself. Cameron was trying to do an impossible job, and the constant accusations against Europe were more successful than the pro-European camp because they touch emotions. So the Brexit camp was all about emotions, stop immigration, defend our country, we need independence, democratic, EU is undemocratic, right? It's very difficult. And the EU camp was not creating any emotions. They were only playing on the rational side of things. And referendums, most referendums are lost on emotions, not on facts. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, I hope that that was a good answer, Andrea. Also, we have 2 questions from Oscar. Oscar, you wrote it down in the chat. I don't know, you can also unmute yourself and ask yourself if you want. If not, I will read it. I don't know.
Oscar, you can do this.
Can you hear us?
We don't mind your accent.
Yes, I can hear you, and I'm really sorry for not. I'm having some problem with the internet, but because I'm connecting on the phone. So my question is. First of all, I'm the student of law in English University, and I can see the backlash of the Brexit because of many conveniences connected to travel, and as well the Erasmus funds that are not available to get for my year abroad. And my question is regarding the further cooperation of European states to have the federalistic state in the future. How is this possible for European Union to do this if we are facing the examples like Poland and Hungary, which are not respecting any of the law and regulation nowadays? How to do it if the citizens from, for example, from France, Italy, are seeing that Poland and Hungary still remaining the European Union's member, where they are not respecting any of the regulation?
Who do you want to answer that?
I think it can be the question to both of the speaker, but to you, Nicholas, I think you mentioned that you've been a part of European Young Movement, as I'm part as well nowadays in UK, the Young European Movement. You'll be able to answer this question as well. Thank you so much.
Well, there's one thing that works in Europe, in the European Union, and that's the rule of law. That's the European Union is based on the rule of law. That Hungary and Poland think they cannot abide the law. It's basically a fantasy. And as you know, the European Union has been working on I'm not going to call them sanctions, but on penalties, and could be both financial or otherwise. There's no point in being in the European Union if you're not going to abide with the rule of law. So you have to use the rule of law as the European Union existence is based on the rule of law. It's the thing that keeps together the union is the rule of law. And why am I repeating the rule of law so much is because it's all to do with legalities. The single market is law. The European Union contract is laws. You can't join it and then think that you get like UK. The reason why I thought the UK leaving is crazy is because they had managed to get a Europe a la carte, a menu. They had a lot of things they wanted. The things they didn't want, they didn't get, like the euro. They had the best of both worlds. Now, Poland and Hungary, they have also a great, having joined, but Europe is dealing with national politics and international politics. National politicians use Europe to their advantage when it's convenient, and when it's not convenient, they use it against Europe. So I don't know what Michael, what do you think? I think because you obviously have something to say.
Well, it's a very good question. The question, I think, is what effect will Brexit have on European identity? And I think it's a blow. It's not a good thing for European identity, whatever that may be now and in the future. You can leave, and it's the sort of thing that you can just go to the doorman at your club and say, I don't want to be a member anymore and I'm leaving. It reduces it to a silly formality almost. So I think it's a blow. But I would also say that these things happen, and there have been massive numbers or very large numbers of entries into the union, and apart from Norway, as far as I'm aware, only one exit, that's Brexit. And these things go up and down. If you look at it in the long run, enthusiasm for Europe as a whole about what Europe is and what it stands for has gone up and down like a yo-yo over the 20th century and 21st century. And particularly since the Second World War, when we get some concrete steps towards the realization of a political manifestation of all those ideas about Europe that have been brewing for centuries. And sometimes it's very popular. In the 60s, it went along very well. In the 70s, with the economic crisis, oil crisis, that sort of thing, it went down. And the 80s were pretty bad. In the 90s, and a number of campaigns were launched by the European Union or its predecessors to try and do something about that. In the 90s, it was pretty good on the whole, with the acquisition, the accession of new states and that kind of thing. And it goes up and down. And I have no doubt that although Europe, the European Union is going through a pretty rough patch at the moment, one way or another, there are one or two bright lights shining. And I think that it's a fair prediction, which I don't often make as a historian, that things will get better. So I'm not devastated by this, although personally I'm totally devastated as a British citizen. But I think that the union will survive it in one way or another, and things will get better.
Thank you, Michael Wendler. There was another question, which I think is also super interesting, from Oscar. He was also asking about what young people can do to stop the anti-European movement. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have an answer for that? Sorry, Oscar, do you also want to add something? I saw you unmute yourself.
To this question, I would like to add that I'm as well based in United Kingdom nowadays. currently, and we are organizing some events and promotion for Young European Movement, like the UK section, which is section we'll call Young European Federalist, but we call differently because of course of obvious reasons. And I saw that during the Reading Festival that we've been taking part in, many young British people are still feeling, maybe not feeling, but they still would like to be part of European Union. And of course, I read some books about if Brexit in the future can mean that United Kingdom can rejoin the European Union. But I'm seeing that how, as a Polish and how as a person that is based in UK, can help to the further cooperation of European Union and maybe in the future the federalistic state. Like, which action can I take apart from such obvious things, which is just becoming the member of such organization? Thank you.
Sorry, Oscar, you said you're in London? Sorry, UK?
I'm based in Sheffield University, but like we are organizing the events in the whole United Kingdom.
Well, you can join. Did you say you joined the European movement?
Yes, I'm the part of Young European Movement, but I don't think so that is enough to do. While European space is so like anti-European movements, for example, in Italy or in Poland nowadays. And really sorry, I cannot switch my camera because I'm on my phone. But next time I promise I will do this.
Well, the thing is, I know there is in Germany. I can connect you. Have you heard of Volt?
I have never heard about Volt.
So Volt is a pro-European youth political party started in Germany. I would encourage. I mean, I know. I mean, I'm going to ask a lot from you, but I would ask you to start a political party. Because joining the European movement only gets you so far. In putting pressure, if you want to put pressure on, but I have to be honest, I don't want to waste your time. The UK, it's a done deal. They left. Don't think there's a hope of them coming back in the short term, maybe in the longer term. But I would focus. You say you're Polish?
I'm Polish citizen, yes.
I mean, you can still do a lot of good in Poland from the UK. And Poland is already part of the European Union, but the more you can do for your own national country to feel European, the better. In the UK, I mean, I've been a very lonely person because you're not very popular if you're pro-European in London and fighting horrible people like Nigel Farage, who lies a lot. He mixes, like the devil, mixes lies with truth, so nobody can tell what the hell is going on. So I'm trying to say, the way we lost in the UK is very sad. We lost, we have to accept it. It was based on a lot of bad lies. But unfortunately, the Conservative Party was a civil war and we were part of that civil war. We lost. I wish I could give you more hope about doing stuff in the UK. I would tell you, yes, the European movement is the beginning of you getting into the discussion about Europe in the UK. I don't know where else or what else you can do. So we stopped in the UK doing work towards trying to convince people that living is a bad idea because we already left. But we did a lot. We did a lot. I mean, it's very sad, but my recommendation is, you know, look at Volt in Germany as an example of the youth of Germany understanding that to move European agenda in Germany, they had to create a pro-European party. It had to be a youth-oriented, and it had to be very localized. So in every city in Germany, you have Volt, people that are promoting themselves as a party. It's a national party. It's a very good case for you to explore.
Yeah, that's a good time to tell you. You can also share your personal contacts in the chat so you can network. Yeah, just feel free to do it. I think it's a great opportunity. Yes. Also in the chat, Lars said that he has an important question. Lars, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael and Nicholas, for your introduction and the important contributions. I come originally from Sweden and I live in Berlin since 20 years. I was, however, one of those who voted for Sweden to join the European Union, and we were a bit afraid. We didn't know really which way it would go, and we barely entered the European Union, and we were envious of the Norwegians who said no shortly later. And when I came to this discussion here, I was thinking, all right, tell me now about the identity. How can we go? I used to work for an American organization being the representative for Europe. So they called me asking how Europe was doing. I was traveling a lot around in Central and Eastern Europe. And I thought I was going to get some good input. I'm sorry to say, gentlemen, but I'm a bit disappointed that I'm even more negative now than before, because I was thinking and hoping you could say, this is the European concept. Lars, you missed it. These are important things. Now I realized, there maybe aren't not the grand solutions. And I'm not very happy when I hear Brussels bureaucracy as a word. I'm certainly not. So maybe not having the aim for the bigger things, but rather the smaller things that make me feel part of Europe. And my questions to you are twofold. If you've done surveys and questions to people, what positive things do they say? Are there any? I don't want to say that the European Song Contest is a product of the European Union, but that at least is something people talk about. We argue about it, but it's a little piece, and at least it gets people involved. And maybe there are other beautiful pieces where we can see the diversity is something good. Maybe it's trivial, but I think we need those sort of trivial pieces of success as well. And one other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and it is, if we don't have a common Europe, and I try not to say European Union because that is not the definition of Europe, but that there should be, and we should be happy for that there are checks and balances somehow in Europe or European Union, because what else? Imagine we take away these and we have all these countries with borders and tariffs against each other, and the Swedes are trying to make sure that this is the best country in Europe, and the Germans do it and Ukrainians do it, and I think that will be, however, it's on the very negative end of the scale. It will be sad to see Europe is good, because otherwise it would be total breakdown. The second question,
Lars, are you from Norway?
As the first one, but I give that to you. Please help us out to see positive things.
Well, Lars, you're from Norway, no?
Sweden.
Oh, sorry, Sweden. So if I came out negative, maybe it's because I wanted to come out negative, because I've been at this project for 30 years. The issue is, I don't blame anyone for the failure of branding of Europe except the EU. I blame the Commission, I blame Parliament, I blame national governments whose agenda is national before it becomes European. And we have failed. Like in climate change, we have failed. I'm saying we because I consider at 55 myself a generation that has failed you. And I have to be negative because Europe is a great risk. When the UK leaves something called the EU in such a way, it's a big message to Europe and the world that Europe and Mr. Putin, we send a message that this thing called European Union, that it seems so strong and powerful, it's very weak. Because a country like UK leaving the European Union sends a big message about we're not united. I mean, that's the message I got. We're not united. This is not the European Union, it's the European disunion. So I am positive that we still have a single currency, which is the second currency in the planet. And in some things is the #1 currency. and a single market. But once the UK comes out, we already have 100 million less, 80 million less citizens part of that single market. So we're starting to deplete the concept of Europe. We might be you might be the last generation that sees a solid Europe, because other countries could decide, yeah, let's do another referendum, and maybe with the influence of certain players like China or even Trump coming back in a few years. So it is a negative. I'm very disappointed at people dying, trying to cross the channel, trying to cross from Africa, and people dying, and the EU cannot get its act together. Yeah, we are not the perfect union. I've always known that, but help, we could have done a lot better.
Can I jump in there?
Michael.
Yeah, I think you're adding to Lars's impression of negativity. You explain it very well. But I don't think it's altogether necessary. As I said earlier, these things go up and down. I would be surprised if the European Union, and indeed Europe itself, didn't become more popular at some stage in the fairly near future. These cycles tend to go in less than 20 years. As an answer to the question, what can we do about it? And what is the answer, which Lars wants? I don't think there is an answer that somebody is going to discover what European identity is exactly and sell it immediately, and everybody will believe in it and we'll have a strong and united Europe. It just doesn't exist. It is, as I say, a debate. It's a discourse, and everybody has a different view of Europe. So there's no simple answer. But that doesn't mean you can't do anything. In state formation, nation formation, there are top-down initiatives and there are bottom-up initiatives. Top-down initiatives generally taken by governments. They unite the currency, they unite the time systems, they unite language, all those sorts of things. That can be done by the Brussels elite, slowly, gently, and it's come quite a long way in doing that, particularly in the economic sphere. But there are also bottom-up initiatives, and this is where I get to what youth can do, what Europhile people can do, people who are interested in building Europe. There's a lot of what you might call civil society in Europe. There are student organizations, there are trade union organizations, there are local political party organizations, there are masses of sporting and cultural organizations, all with EU or Europe stamped on them. And that is a way that ordinary people can actually contribute to a feeling of mutual benefit within Europe and enjoyment of Europe. So I don't think there's no hope. And there are things that individual people can do, especially youth. The future rests on the hope of youth. So don't give up. The bad things in the world will never go away without good education and young people growing up and pushing the old fogies out of the way. So go on. Don't let it go.
Lars, I agree with Michael. There's no one single shot, but I mean, I have to tell you the truth about myself. I am a federalist. I believe in federalist system for Europe because it makes it into a clear thing of where we're trying to go, because the vision is the problem. We don't have a vision of Europe. If you go to our website, brand.eu, it gives you kind of a vision of Europe or where we think we should be going. But if I had to explain to the generations of Europe, I have to say, look, we want to be a strong, united federation in the world, rather than a hybrid between a federation, but not a federation with an unclear. We need to go to a federation, have a constitution, and not allow countries that once they join to leave. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, Europe will continue. Yes, as Michael has said, it will continue because you have to have hope. It's very difficult to dismantle the European Union, by the way, Lars. It's very difficult, but it's possible. And you saw it with Brexit. And don't forget, the UK has never been really into the European Union with their heart. They were always skeptic. But anybody who's not convinced about something will be a skeptic, and we have skeptics all over Europe. There's parties in Spain that want to leave the European Union. If these parties start using the same rhetoric of immigration, you can start getting forces in the national states of people that want to do referendums about why are we in the EU. during the financial crisis, we in Greece, you remember the big financial crisis in Greece, the banks were already purchasing software to bring back the drachma. Can you imagine? Yes, banks, because I've talked to the CEO of Goldman Sachs and local banks in Greece, they were purchasing and instructing people to develop software for be able to convert the drachma to euro, the drachma to dollar, because they thought they were going back to the drachma. Can you imagine? So what I'm trying to say, I'm more of a realist. I'm not a negative person, but I'm telling you the truth. And it's up to youth to, of course, start thinking like in Volt in Germany is doing. If we want to protect Europe in Germany, we got to create a political party, and they did it. It's a good case study to look at. But I think Europe is still going through an identity crisis, and until we solve it, Europe's never going to be finalized.
Thank you, Nicholas. There's another question to Michael from Andrea. Andrea, do you want to ask yourself, or should I read from the chat? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Please, Yossi, go ahead, because I'm sick today. I called sick, so I'm just following with my limited energies.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. So Andrea's asking, Michael, like, I have worked in Ukraine for 6 years, and I'm not sure that a good part of the population does understand well what the EU is about. What should the EU do more to close the gap between Ukrainians and the European identity? Yes, this question goes to you. Nicholas, if you want to add a comment also to this after that, also fine.
Yes, of course.
Am I muted? No. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. I think actually Nicholas is much better at doing this. I'm in my own mind, I've never been to Ukraine, though I'm very interested in it as a sort of amateur observer. But I feel it's difficult, and I have a sort of personal problem, which I think a lot of people share, about saying or telling people how they should behave in order to become more European or more like the EU. I find that very difficult. I find that sort of hegemonic discourse distasteful. If you feel European, if Ukrainians feel European, then as far as I'm concerned, they are. That's a difficult thing to say about somewhere in East Asia, but certainly in a geographical area which might consider itself to be European, and Ukraine certainly does nowadays, though not always, then it's, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Ukrainians are Europeans, and if they want to express that, then that's fine. So that's not a very complete answer, but I have some problems with it, telling Ukrainians how to behave in order to become European.
So is Andrea asking that question?
Yeah, and Andreas asked, what, in the case of Ukraine, what can the EU do to close the gap between Ukrainians and European identity? And yeah, I don't know, Nicholas, if you want to add something. If not, I have another question for all of you, but yeah.
I have to be very practical and realistic for this answer. We lost Ukraine. We lost Ukraine. How can we regain it? We need youth in Ukraine to continue to fly that flag. But when I say we lost, is that Europe did nothing on the annexation of Crimea. We did nothing to really of any weight to be able to show that, you know, we were going to support the Ukraine, the part of the Ukraine that wanted to stay independent as a nation state. And as you know, that's another sign. These are all signs of weakness. We're always on the weakness side of things. So Ukraine, you still need to have the only way you can do some stuff in Ukraine is grassroots. Don't expect the European Union or the Commission or the army to come and do anything, because there's no such a thing. you have to do grassroots and still believe that one day you will join the European Union. We want every country that wants to come. I propose that Northern Maghreb, north of Africa, should join the European Union, because the more we involve these people, because I can see Africa from Spain. I can see Morocco. I can see all these countries from Spain. They're why shouldn't we bring them in if there's such incredible amount of resources, right? And if we want to make sure that we stop immigration, the only way is to start giving those countries more power. So I'm a very open-minded. I mean, Russia should be part of the European Union.
Thank you, Nicholas. Andrea, I hope this gives some answers to you. So our time is running out already, and I have a question for all of you. How do you, or what do you wish for the future of Europe, especially regarding European identity? I do not want to start to ask our speakers. I would love to ask our participants first to hear some of your opinions. It can be just 1 or 2 sentences. Maybe Lars, you can start. Just tell us, what do you wish for the future of Europe, especially European identity?
Did I hear my name?
Yep.
Well, then I'll continue where I stopped then. That maybe we accept that the visions of a big pan-European is not a big bureaucracy, but rather the smaller things that make us feel a bit together. If it's the Erasmus project where students can go and visit other universities, if it is that we don't need visas anymore, so we can have choirs to travel between the countries. If yes, the currency is really important and it's a big project, it makes it also easier. I have still Swedish crowns here, but that are also positive things that I think we should not forget. And I stop there, otherwise I get carried away here.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's perfect. I also see a comment in the chat from Joachim Winters. He says he wishes for the future of Europe, especially European identity, common social basics, for example, Euro dividend. Yes. Thank you, Joachim. Are there any other comments? Also from Oscar, we heard from you. What do you wish for the future of Europe?
I just wish that European Union will remain, and countries and of the governments of countries like Poland, Hungary, in general, like Eastern Bloc, will change for better, and we're gonna, just the young people, get into bigger and further cooperation, and things like Erasmus or just free travel will stay with us forever.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have some other comments in the chat from Angela. She says, "Thank you for interesting discussion. I'm from Ukraine and I feel me as European, but as I see in Ukraine, it is important for the people not to leave Ukrainian identity too. We have to find the right way to combine it, national and international." Thank you, Angela. Also from Andrea. "I'm afraid I have to leave. Great. Thanks for the interesting discussion." Yes, thank you. Also, I don't know if Inukenti wants to say something.
Yes, actually, I want to. Thank you, Josie. First of all, I wanted to say from the bottom of my heart a great thank you to all the speakers and to interesting questions from participants. As I understood, everybody who talked today, they are either not from Ukraine or haven't had any connection to Ukraine, like direct one. I am from Ukraine, and it was very insightful and interesting to hear your opinions on the country which is aspiring now to become a part of the EU, especially as I am honestly not very articulate in the concept of European identity in general. And what I would like, I heard a lot of great ideas today about building new bridges and stuff like that, and I completely agree with that. But I think that it is important, and here I agree with Angela, that we as Europeans find a common root in the past. So for the future, I would like for us to find something common which unites us as Europeans, and you know, this red line which is stretching from the ancient times, and for me, for example, the thing I'm proud the most as a European, that Europe has one of the greatest and longest histories on earth as a like civilized society thing. I think Michael probably can agree. I don't know if you want to add something.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with that. I think China makes a much stronger case. But that's an error I can forgive. It certainly has a very long history, Europe. And I think there is such a thing as European civilization, which has been around for a very long time, but not continuous. It comes and goes. If I may add one question, because I can see we're out of time. Well, not a question, a suggestion which hasn't come up yet. The power of the media. The media was extremely important in Brexit. And if we want to convince people to a more European feelings, then I think to concentrate on the media, journalism, that kind of thing, especially by youthful people, that would be very useful indeed. So if you ask what I would like, don't quite know how to achieve it, that is something which I think is really important. Go to the media and influence people through their media.
Thank you, Innocentia, and also thank you, Michael.
I just want to say one thing. My heart was broken when I saw the Maidan in I think it was 2013, and the lack of the people fighting for Europe in Ukraine. That really showed me how much it meant for Ukrainians to be part of the European Union. And my heart was broken when then we had the Russian conflict. So to me, of course, Ukraine is in it has to join the European Union when it's possible.
Thank you, Nicholas. Lars?
Yes, Nicholas, let me try to mend your heart.
Thank you.
That was a big international event, and yes, maybe it wasn't possible, but I think either you or Michael said, it's important with grassroots measures.
Right.
And let me then give it over back to you, so you'll see that the Ukrainian Values Project is rather a grassroots initiative that grown a lot beyond little grass. So I'd like to say at this point, thank you very much to you, to the partner organizations, the three of you, partner organizations, the four of you in the team. I think this is excellent done, both the project per se and your seminar here. Thank you. I think it's a good thing for all of us to keep in mind. Yes, we were not there at Maidan to the extent we maybe should have been. We didn't stop the Brits from leaving, but Josie and team, you managed this. Really good.
Thank you so much, Lars. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. No, really, this is the kind of thing that you gotta keep doing, please.
Yeah, no, yeah, really, we really liked it. We love to hear your voices. We will bring them, actually gather them, write them down, and bring them to the conference on the Future of Europe platform. So we hope it has maybe a little impact on the future. Yeah, it's hard to get people online and talk about these topics, like, yeah, but we have to come to an end because time has already run out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much, Michael, as well.
Yes, thank you so much for participating. Also, yeah, Nicholas and Michael, it was a pleasure to have you here. thank you so much. Feel free to put your contacts in the chat, as I said before, to network and keep this conversation and dialogue going.
You're muted now. You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. This is a Google document in the chat. It has 3 simple questions regarding this session and also, again, the future of Europe. It would be great if you could answer it, not now, maybe later or tomorrow. Yes, and let's wrap the session up. This is actually the last session of the Ukrainian Vibes European Public Sphere Tour 2021. Maybe it will return, or hopefully it will return next year. Yeah, as I said, we will hand over your ideas to the Conference on the Future of Europe, and we will also publish an idea catalog where we will also write down and gather all the thoughts, ideas, and comments we have heard so far. Yes, I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thanks again for participating.